Hello, Algebra 2. There are 3 short videos tonight. The first one, this is video 3, is on your first topic. And the learning target is I can factor trinomials when a is not equal to 1. And there are 2 methods with our factoring technique number 2 when a is not equal to 1. And the 2 methods are, number 1 is logic reverse FOIL, and number 2 that you can use slide and divide. Always, before you try either of these methods, make sure you remember to find the greatest common factor first. So our first example using our logic is we realize there's no greatest common factor, and our steps for logic is we're going to have the same steps as when you used when a is 1, and you're going to write out the parentheses. 2 sets of parentheses because we're doing reverse FOIL. And then step 2, we're looking at the factors of the first term. So for this example, our factors of our first term, all we have is 2x times x. That's our only options. So that's what we'll put in our first spots, 2x times x. Then our step number 3 is we're going to decide which factors of the last term will help you add up to the middle term. So go ahead and pause the video and think about your factors of negative 12. Go ahead and write out the options that might help you make it work. Okay, so I wrote out all the possible options that would multiply to negative 12, 2 different factors. And now I have to decide which 2 and which place will I put them in. So we have this spot and this spot. And I'm going to think about how would I get it to add up to 5x. And I have another item to think about with this 2x here. So you can work backwards and guess and check, or you think about it logically. For me, I'm immediately thinking about, okay, which of these factors, if I multiply one times one of them by 2 and subtract the other, will I get 5? And I realize it must be 4 and 3. I can multiply 4 times 2 and then subtract the 3. So then if I'm deciding that's the 1, because I need a positive 5, then I have to make sure I put the positive 4 here. Well, it would multiply, the outers would multiply, so 4 times 2x. And the inner would multiply by our x. So then we FOIL to check, and we have 8x minus 3x, which would be 5x. So that is the method to use logic. Okay, so that's our logic steps. So our next 2 examples, I'm going to show the other method. And again, you can pick any method, either of these, to do any of the problems. So our method of slide and divide, the steps are listed here. And our first step is called the slide part. And we're multiplying a by c. And what I mean by that is we're in standard form, and here's our a, the number in front of the x squared, is going to get multiplied by our constant. So let's go ahead and start the first problem using that first step. So number 2, and the problem is 7x squared minus 13x minus 2. So our first step with the slide and divide method is we're going to slide. We're going to multiply this 7 times the negative 2. So 7 times negative 2 is negative 14. So it slides over there and multiplies, so it stays to here. Now we're finding 2 factors. We're back to where a is 1, and that makes it a lot easier. We don't have to, unless you like the logic, you already know what is in this side. We have x and x here, and then we just have to think about 2 factors that would multiply to negative 14 and add up to negative 13. Right, that would be negative 14 and positive 1. Because 1 times negative 14 is negative 14. And then 1x and negative 14x would add up to negative 13x. So the problem with slide and divide is at this step it looks like you're done, but you're not. Remember, every time you slide, you got to come back and divide. And what we mean by divide is we have to divide each factor by a. So what we slid must come back and divide. So we took the 7 over here, so now we have to divide both by 7. And it's just the second part of our parentheses here where we divide by 7. Then on step 4 we have to simplify the fractions. So 1/7 is as simple as it gets, but negative 14 over 7 would simplify to negative 2. So we're going to write that. So this is step 4. And then our last step is if there is still fractions left after you've simplified, then you place the denominator in front of x. So this 7 will come out in front. And then you always multiply to check. So we have 7x squared minus 14x plus x, which would be minus 13x, minus 2. So we have finished factoring step number 2, problem number 2. A good thing to do would be to check it tonight if you have time using the logic method. I want to first go ahead and walk through problem number 3 with you because slide and divide takes a little more practice. So I'm going to finish on practicing number 3 before we stop. So number 3, and again our first step is slide, and the 6 slides to the 1, so 6 times 1 is 6. So we're left here w squared, 5w plus 6. Now we factor it, and we have w and w, and then 2 numbers that multiply to 6 and add up to negative 5. Now this is interesting. It has to multiply to a positive, but it has to add up to a negative. So both items have to be negative. And what 2 numbers multiply to 6 and add up to 5? That's right. It's 3 and 2. Then our next step is to divide by a again. And here we're then going to simplify our fractions. So 3 over 6 simplifies to 1/2, and 2 over 6 simplifies to 1/3. And then our last step is then we move the denominator back in front and we check to make sure we get our answer. Both denominators would move. And now we check to see if we got our final. So we have 6w squared minus 3w and minus 2w, and that adds up to minus 5w, and then negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Okay. All right, that's it for the video on factoring trinomials when a is not 1. If this is your first night watching the videos, remember you have 2 more short videos to watch, video 4 and 5. Have a great night.